Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are diving deep into cases defined by the unexpected. We're talking about those rare investigations where the initial crime is just a loose thread, and when you pull on it, the entire fabric of reality seems to unravel. Some of these stories feel like they were ripped straight from a Hollywood thriller, too chaotic, too coincidental, or too cruel to be real. But I assure you, every single detail we are about to discuss is 100% true. Our first case is a labyrinth of identity theft, abduction, and murder. It's not just one tragedy. It's a cascade of horrors that span decades, hiding in plain sight. In 1986, in Forest Park, Georgia, a teenager named Sharon Marshall seemed destined for greatness. She was a lieutenant colonel in her ROTC program, beautiful, popular, and undeniably brilliant. She had a full-ride scholarship waiting for her at Georgia Tech, with dreams of becoming an aerospace engineer for NASA. But Sharon never made it to campus. Beneath the surface of her high-achieving life, she was harboring a secret. Sharon was pregnant, and instead of heading to university, she gave up her scholarship, placed her baby for adoption, and fled the state with a man named Franklin Delano Floyd to the outside world. Frank was a father figure, or perhaps a boyfriend. Their relationship was uncomfortably ambiguous. They moved to Tampa, Florida, for a fresh start. Sharon eventually had another child, a son named Michael, whom she decided to raise. But life with Frank was volatile. Frank claimed to be a painter, but a bad back kept him on the couch, forcing Sharon to support the family. The brilliant would-be engineer was forced to work as an exotic dancer to keep the lights on, while Frank controlled her life from the shadows. It was at the club where Sharon worked that she met Cheryl Comiso. Cheryl was 18, fiery, and fiercely protective of Sharon, but Frank hated her. Tensions boiled over during a boating trip in 1989, following a violent argument. Cheryl reported Sharon to social services for welfare fraud, essentially cutting off Frank's easy money. Frank was enraged. Witnesses saw him punch Cheryl in the face outside the club. Shortly after, Cheryl vanished. Her Corvette was found abandoned at an airport, but Cheryl was gone. Police suspected Frank and Sharon, but without a body or physical evidence. The couple slipped away, moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma. In Tulsa, the abuse intensified. Frank and Sharon were now legally married, but Frank's behavior was erratic. He openly threatened Sharon's co-workers, telling one, "If she ever left me, I'd kill her." Tragically, Sharon was trying to leave. She was making plans to escape with her son, Michael. But before she could get away, Sharon was found unconscious on the side of a highway, the victim of a brutal hit-and-run. Frank claimed he was asleep when it happened. Sharon fought for her life in the hospital. Friends said she was stabilizing, waking up until Frank banned visitors. 5 days later, Sharon was dead. The medical examiner noted old bruises consistent with abuse and suggested her fatal head wound didn't even look like a car accident, but with no proof. Frank walked free and immediately tried to cash in an $80,000 life insurance policy. This is where the first loose thread was pulled. When Frank tried to collect the money, he used various aliases. When he finally provided a real name to the insurance agents, the system flagged him. Frank Floyd wasn't just a grieving husband, he was a fugitive. Decades prior, in the 1960s, Frank had been convicted of abducting a child. He had escaped a mental institution, robbed a bank, and been on the run ever since. Authorities finally caught up with him, arresting him in Georgia. Sharon's friends felt justice had been served. But the nightmare was far from over. With Frank in prison, Sharon's son, Michael, now 6 years old, was placed in foster care. He was thriving with a loving family. But in 1994, Frank was released, and he went straight for the boy. Frank stormed Michael's elementary school, held the principal at gunpoint, and abducted Michael. He tied the principal to a tree in the woods and vanished with the child. 2 months later, police found Frank in Kentucky. He was alone. To this day, he has told authorities, "It's none of your business where he is." Frank went back to prison for the kidnapping, but the twists kept coming. In 1995, mechanics in Kansas bought an old truck at an auction, a truck Frank had stolen and abandoned while on the run. Inside, they found an envelope of horrors. It contained 97 photographs. They depicted a woman, bound and battered. Police matched injuries in the photos to a Jane Doe skeleton found in Florida. It was Cheryl Comesso. Frank was finally convicted of her murder and sentenced to death. But there were other photos in that truck, photos of a young girl, photos that looked much older. Authorities launched a massive investigation to identify the child in the pictures. It took until 2014, nearly 20 years later, to uncover the darkest truth of all. Sharon Marshall was not Sharon Marshall. Her real name was Suzanne Savarkis. In the mid-70s, her mother had briefly married Frank under one of his aliases, when her mother was jailed for 30 days for a minor crime. Frank kidnapped her children. He abandoned the others but kept Suzanne. He renamed her Sharon. He raised her as his daughter. He abused her. Then, he raised her to believe she was his wife. The man Sharon had lived with, married, and feared her entire life was actually her stepfather and her kidnapper. Frank Floyd eventually admitted that he had murdered 6-year-old Michael shortly after kidnapping him from the school, burying the boy near an interstate. Michael's remains have never been found. It is a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions, a bright young woman and her innocent son, both erased by a monster who wore the mask of a father. If the story of Sharon Marshall proves that monsters can hide in plain sight, our next case proves that sometimes the monster isn't just one person, it's an entire family's secrets, festering until they explode. We travel now to the Valognes Valley in eastern France. It is 1980. Jean-Marie and Christine Villemin are a young, successful couple. Jean-Marie has just been promoted to foreman at the local factory, and they have settled into a beautiful new home with their infant son, Gregory, but their success bred envy. It started with the phone calls. A raspy, disguised voice would call the house, threatening Jean-Marie, promising vengeance. The caller seemed to know everything: their schedules, their habits, their family gossip. Then came the letters, anonymous, hateful notes signed only by Le Corbeau the Crow. For 4 years, the Villemins lived in a state of siege, but on October 16, 1984, the threats turned physical. 4-year-old Gregory was playing in the front yard. In a span of minutes, he vanished. A massive search was launched, but dread set in when Gregory's uncle received a call from the Crow. "I have taken the boy. I have strangled him. I have thrown him into the Valognes River. My revenge is done." Gregory's body was found that night in the cold river water, bound hand and foot. His wool had pulled down over his face. The brutality shocked the nation, but the investigation that followed would tear the family and the country apart. Handwriting experts analyzed the Crow's letters. Suspicion fell on Jean-Marie's cousin, Bernard Laroche. Evidence was circumstantial, but Jean-Marie was convinced. When a judge released Laroche due to a lack of concrete proof, Jean-Marie made a vow: if the law wouldn't punish the monster, he would. In a twist that stunned France, Jean-Marie Villemin grabbed a shotgun, drove to his cousin's house, and shot Bernard Laroche dead as he left work. The grieving father was now a murderer. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But the case wasn't over. With Laroche dead and Jean-Marie in prison, investigators turned their gaze to a new suspect: Gregory's mother, Christine. New experts claimed the handwriting on the threatening letters belonged to her. Christine was charged with the murder of her own son. She went on a hunger strike to prove her innocence. Eventually, the charges were dropped, and she was fully exonerated years later. But the question remained: who was the Crow? In 2017, over 30 years later, the case was reopened. Modern AI analysis suggested the threatening letters were a group effort written by multiple family members jealous of Jean-Marie's success. Arrests were made, but the Crow has never been definitively unmasked. It remains a chilling reminder that sometimes hatred runs thicker than blood. Our final case today features what might just be the most unbelievable twist in the history of missing persons. We're going back to 1994, in San Antonio, Texas. 13-year-old Nicholas Barclay was a troubled kid. He had a juvenile record, a history of fighting, and 3 distinct, homemade tattoos. On June 13th, he was out playing basketball with his friends. He called home for a ride, was told to walk, and then he just disappeared. Police initially assumed he'd run away, which wasn't totally out of character for him, but days turned into weeks, then months, and eventually years. The Barclay family slowly began to accept the terrible reality that Nicholas was gone forever. Then, in 1997, a full 3 years later, the phone rang. It was the authorities. They had incredible news. Nicholas had been found all the way in a youth shelter in Linares, Spain. The story he told was horrific. Nicholas claimed he had been abducted by a military trafficking ring and smuggled to Europe. Said he had finally escaped after years of unimaginable torture. Nicholas's sister, Harry, immediately booked a flight to Spain. When she walked into the room, she saw a boy huddled in the corner, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, looking absolutely terrified. She ran to him, she hugged him, she told him he was finally safe, and she brought him home to Texas. But almost as soon as he arrived, the red flags started waving. The Nicholas that left Texas was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed American kid. The Nicholas that returned had dark hair, dark brown eyes, and spoke with a thick French accent. His explanation: he claimed his captors had chemically dyed his eyes and hair to hide his identity. Incredibly, the family seemed to accept this. He moved back into Nicholas's old room. He enrolled in the local high school. He lived as Nicholas Barclay for 5 long months. But a private investigator, hired by a TV crew that was filming The Miracle Return, wasn't buying it. He knew that ears are like fingerprints, they're unique, and they don't change. So he compared photos of the real Nicholas to this new one. They didn't match. The FBI got involved. Fingerprints revealed the shocking truth. This wasn't Nicholas Barclay at all. This was Frederick Burden, a 23-year-old French con artist known as the Chameleon. He had stolen the identity of a missing American child just to get a place to sleep and a fresh start. Frederick was arrested and eventually sentenced to prison. But this is where the story takes its final, lingering, and most chilling twist. In interviews from prison, Frederick Burden made a bold claim. He said it was all too easy. He claimed the family noticed the differences immediately: the wrong eye color, the accent, the fact that he looked older, but they pretended to believe him anyway. Why? Frederick's theory was that they needed an imposter to stop the police from looking for the real Nicholas, because someone in the house had already killed him. Suspicions then turned toward Nicholas's older brother, Jason, a recovering addict who had been the last person to speak to Nicholas that day. But before police could properly investigate this new lead, Jason died of a drug overdose, taking any potential secrets with him. To this day, the real Nicholas Barclay remains missing. Was his family the victim of a master manipulator? Or did they welcome a conman into their home to hide a much darker truth? These cases leave us with more questions than answers. They remind us that the most terrifying twists don't happen in movies, they happen in quiet neighborhoods, in family living rooms, and in the silence of kept secrets. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. I really want to know your thoughts on this one. So let me know in the comments, do you think the Barclay family knew the truth? Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes open.